I've been asked by more than one person to talk about light and shadows, for whatever reason, so okay. And I could use the practice anyway, so here we go. Let's start out by looking at direct light, where the light is literally directly hitting a surface. Indirect light, and then where an object isn't getting any light, thus in shadow, right? This is going to seem pretty obvious because it can be. We could also talk about cool shadows versus warm light, orange and blue. Even if you're looking at shadows on a white surface. My painting instructor back at Montserrat said this once, that it's all orange and blue, and then we did a whole thing that was, instead of doing a black and white painting in black and white, we used orange and blue. It changed the way my brain functioned. But either way, here is where we can see light coming from and where it starts to disperse. So you can see kind of how light can interact with surfaces. This depends on the bulb, it depends on a lot of things. This goes on objects the light touches as well. So I want to show you what I'm talking about, and here's what light and shadow look like on them. If you're just looking at a white light creating a shadow on a white ceiling, that's what I'm talking about, that it might actually look orange or blue. Otherwise, it's just warm versus cold colors. So you'll get green and blue and purple shadows on an object that you'll otherwise think of as just white. So keep that in mind. Lights can be warm or cool, and the shadows can correspond. And that's not even getting into bounced color and light, which we'll talk about a little later. I'm going to draw right on this guy to show you what I mean. And when you're drawing or painting, you can also play with the negative space. And I'll have a better example of that later. Eggs. And yeah, took that picture sometime in high school. Light source to the left, but took new ones for this. Not as artsy. Just for fun, I want to show you different amounts of light sources and what they do on a surface. So the classic for this study is to use an egg. I have a collection of eggs, as you may have just seen, that aren't actually real eggs. I also have real eggs somewhere in this house, but I've selected two of two very different textures so we can see what the light does. And yeah, let's start complicated, and then we'll lessen our light sources. Here we have all the lights from my library, and thus the egg has many shadows from various directions, right? And then we lessen the light source to 2 points closer together. And we see a paler shadow on either side of the significantly darker shadow where they overlap. So it's literally both shadows are in this one spot. Just to show you that shadow doesn't automatically equal black. There are different degrees of shadow. Looking closer at the shiny egg, let's take a look at it from the dark side. And when you're drawing from the light source on the opposite side of the subject from the viewer, meaning there's us and then there's egg and then there's light source, it can create like a rim lighting, which is a neat design element, but we're not seeing that here because this is still a light source that's mostly above the object. You can see where the light source is pretty clearly on the shiny egg itself. Do keep in mind though the highlights we see, the very, very bright highlights, that's going to change depending on where your eyeball is, because that's just bouncing off into your eye, specifically the highlight. And then the textured egg has less reflective properties, so we're seeing less of the environment around the object as well. So there's the light hitting the egg, and we see the light on the egg and what that looks like, versus the shadow it's creating. And then there's that tiny little highlight that, I don't want to say has nothing to do with it, it does, but it's separate, it's a different part of it. And you can change where that highlight is in your drawings, just depending on what looks nice. You can change the shape of it. The more a light source is directly above the object, the less shadow you'll see. Think high noon in a western. I also took this picture of this eyeball. I just like it. Okay, so now we get to the meat of the matter. One light source. So you've got your light coming in at this direction, and then this shadow both on the object itself, which is the form shadow, right? That actually on the object shadow. And then where it's blocking the light from hitting the surface it's on. That's the cast shadow. Think of casting like a fishing line, right? Kind of tossed out. Why am I using fishing metaphors? I don't fish. And then there's that bounced light. I think I talked a little bit about that when we were in the color theory video. And shadows, again, when you're drawing a more cartoony shadow, obviously dark shadows can be dark all the way through, but just like I don't need to shade a picture in black, if you're going for realism, keep in mind where the shadow will be darkest and where the light is going to bounce off objects, the environment, and reflect it back again. You see that darkest bit where the egg meets the cardboard? How about that bit on the egg itself, between what you might think of as the rest of the shadow and then the light? That's happening because the cardboard is white, and we're seeing the reflection from that surface. If the cardboard were black, this wouldn't be so drastic. You might not even see it at all. When drawing something for your imagination, having that little bit of bounced light can help the object's form come into view and not look too flat. Let's draw a face! Alright. Eyes, nose, the lips. That ear is probably huge, but whatever. Eyebrows, hair, okay. Light coming from the left somewhere. Let's assume it's a strong light and there isn't much light otherwise. Keeping in mind the shape of the eye is an eyeball. There is also a roundness to it, right? Just like our eggs. And to the chin, so even if the other side is in total darkness, there's still shapes, right? Maybe there's a little dip above the nose, by the forehead. You say forehead or forehead? But maybe there's some bounced light too. And light maybe still reaching the cheekbone over here, or the jawline. The ear might have a little light on it. Play with light and darkness. Remember that things have shapes. That sounds obvious, but remember that things have form. Let's add a neck to our floating head. And shoulders, less shoulder. So we have the shadows from the neck itself, and from the head onto the rest of the form, maybe some bounced light. Maybe a little light coming in from behind. Maybe there's a window open somewhere, I don't know. Maybe this figure isn't naked. Nude. Maybe figure has a little top on that's also going to cast a little light and have a little shadow. Everything has form and can potentially cast a shadow. Obviously, as the parts of the object get closer to the light, it'll be brighter. We're also not talking about highlights here. We're just looking at the light on the object. So, again, any of those extra bright bits, those are highlights, and actually a reflection of the light. That's more about your eyes and how it's reflected back to you, as I said before. So the highlight does move as you move. And again, the highlight can be different shapes, sizes, and so on. Different areas from where you might assume it would be based on the light source depends on your image. And tonal values, otherwise, are just going to be darker away from the light, brighter toward it, unless light is bouncing from somewhere else. Totally simple, right? I realize it's not. I was always told to push the darks in my drawings, and I did not understand that until way later in life. This is my formal apology to George Diroff, one of the greatest teachers I've ever had. He tried so hard. I'd like to think I retained some information. I wanted everything to be very smooth and low, light to dark, and it's gonna look a lot cleaner if you let your midtones not actually be middle and let them be lighter, and then make your darker tones much darker. So this is rudimentary little ball. But yeah, because my instinct would make it 50-50, light and dark, and it doesn't look good, it looks muddy. So allow your lighter part to be lighter, and you're gonna see that roundness a little better. Here is a mug for the thing that I drew on it, and I'm just using this as, there we go, light above it, light in front of it, right? Like what happens on the inside versus the outside. I got the outside blocking a little bit of the light. Got my hand actually blocking a little bit of light. And any of these you can draw. Isn't that exciting? I think that's exciting. Okay. Done shining a bright light in my face. Okay, for our finale here, I'm gonna use a picture of myself back in ye olden times. I'm not fully in shadow here, but having this under a layer of darkness, that sounded kind of badass. You know what I'm saying. I put it literally under a dark layer, and I'm using a digital kneaded eraser to lift away the portions. Now, if you've ever used a kneaded eraser in like your physical actual hand, they're neat because they are just lifting up the lights, lifting away whatever you're using. So if you're drawing someone in shadow, you can do this even more effectively, as far as I'm concerned, by starting in shadow. It's a fun fact about the Batman animated series from the 90s, is they did it on black paper. And I don't know if any other cartoon ever did that, but that's kind of cool. Starting with black, and then you're lifting up the light after that. And this works for showing somebody in a dark room, obviously. Since you're literally seeing less information, less light is available, less light is bouncing into your eyes, right? Back into your eyeballs. And that means less we're seeing. Again, bouncing back rather than shining a light directly in your eyes. Obviously a different thing. Bounced light back into the eyes and bounced like off of other surfaces, shapes, values, edges. So I'm just taking away from the darkness what I think is the most valuable light. The light we need in order for this image to make sense as an image. And then we'll see what it looks like as just the light in the darkness. Yeah, it's just a fun exercise. Feel free to do it at home. And I don't know, share with the internet, tag me. I'm still on the internet some places. Occasional places. Comment! Leave a comment if you do this at home or if you ever did something similar in school. And I hope this was helpful. If not, sorry. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. If you have other kinds of tutorials you think I could do, or you would like me to struggle and be entertaining for you, I am happy to do so. Just let me know. And rock on.